Welcome to the next installment of the Many Minds podcast, where we encourage collaborative community healthcare using many minds for better outcomes. I am Alex Davis, physician assistant, along with Tyler Murray, nurse practitioner. And the two of us work together at Summit Brain, Spine, and Orthopedics in Lehi, Utah. The purpose of the podcast is to promote interaction between specialties, dig into what makes your specialty special. I want to talk about the stuff we don't usually get to talk about as other healthcare providers. What's life like in your shoes, and what can we do to support what you're doing to provide better care for your patients?
General disclaimer, the podcast represents the opinions of myself, Alex, and our guest on the show. The content from this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We're just here to learn and have a good time together. And with that, we're going to jump into this week's podcast. So we're joined by Viet, and you're kind of a holder of many hats, if you will. Cardiology being maybe the specialty that, as far as medically speaking, but you're involved in research. Yep. You're also teaching. Why don't you go ahead and just dive into a little bit of your background and kind of currently what you're doing?
Sure. I often tell people that I am the Forrest Gump of PAs. If you can remember the Forrest Gump movie, kind of finds himself in all sorts of amazing places and may not be the right person to be there, but here I am, right? So through my career, I started out as an athletic trainer, actually. So my undergraduate is exercise science with athletic training emphasis. And that was way back in 2000. And I was a head athletic trainer for a year at a high school. And I just, after a year of working at a PT clinic, then teaching in the afternoons and covering all games for all teams, and a bumps and bruises clinic, I found that 80 hours a week was just a little too much in that space. But I loved it. I loved being on the sideline. So I actually reached out to our former head athletic trainer at the University of Utah, Gerald Fisher, and he was head athletic trainer of the basketball team, so the Rick Majerus era. And he said, well, man, that's a lot of hours, but I get you, man, because he was an athletic trainer as well. Mm-hmm. He said, well, why don't you do what I just did? And I said, what is that? Well, I became a PA. I said, I have no idea what you're saying. I had no idea what a PA was. Yeah. And so he explained, and I applied up at the University of Utah into their program. And this is the thing. You put your application in, they tell you, it'll be like 3 or 4 years. You have to apply several times. And then if you get an interview, it's 2 or 3 more times. I got in an interview that year, and I thought, well, that's crazy. That never happens. Right, yeah. And I went. I just went and had fun. And it turns out if you just have fun in your interview, it's a good thing, right? Yeah. So they were like, yeah, okay, this guy plays well in the sandbox. It's good. We'll have him. Yeah. And so they said, hey, why don't you join our class? Finances were not set. We were newly married. And so, you have a mortgage and suddenly you're off at school again. During that time, I went and worked at LDS Hospital as a cardiac therapist. So I leveraged my exercise physiology degree. Yeah. And turns out that was the right thing to do. I did that on the weekends while I was at PA school. And all of the cardiac team got to know me. And then they said, hey, why don't you join our cardiology group as you graduate? And that's what I did. I did that for about 2 years. It was amicable, but I left for occupational medicine and did that for about 7 years at the VA, Salt Lake, the George Wallen. And about 2012, I decided to come back to cardiology, but they only had a research position. I'm like, research? I didn't do any research. I have no idea what this is. Yeah. And they said, well, that's good because we don't know either. We're not quite sure what you'll do, but we need a PA, we think. So I said, okay. Yeah. So I in 2012, I became a cardiovascular researcher. And the last decade, 12 years, really has been amazing. It's been amazing. But during that time, I did some things for Intermountain, including teaching high school students about health professions. And that's when John Barrett's mom discovered me
I
was teaching, on health professions. She calls John and says, "You need this PA. He needs to teach at Rocky Mountain University." And it hadn't even started yet. We hadn't even gotten our first group.
Weren't even teaching a cohort yet.
No, they were still putting it together. And so he reached out and said, come on out. And so that kind of was my first teaching gig. I had some ties with the University of Utah and did some of their interviewing for student cohorts, but I had never really taught a course at the PA program until Rocky Mountain University. And so that was the teaching portion. And a few years later, in 2017, I became part-time, was adjunct initially. But through all of this, I went, so this is the lesson. You just go full feet, both feet in, just jump into it.
Yeah.
And if you're hesitant, it's full send. You just have to full send. Otherwise, you're going to, fail fast, fail quickly, fall forward. And
that's awesome. I love that. That's the best advice.
What can happen? You fail, and then you just get up and do something else, right?
Yeah.
And so at the American College of Cardiology, I started just getting involved in stuff.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, they're like, "Hey, will you co-chair this, PA work group?" There's 1,000 PAs in the American College of Cardiology. We just need a chair. And I said, "I don't want to be chair. I can be co-chair." And they go, okay. So they put two of us together. 1 year position that extended 8 years later. I was still in the position.
Wow.
But during that time, then I met all the people that led me to the Academy of PAs in Cardiology. Yeah. Ended up on their executive board, and then I was honored to be the president for 2 years. And I'm actually serving my last year as the immediate past president. So I'm in my second year of that, while I'm Utah Academy president.
President of the local Utah Academy of PAs. Yeah.
So that's kind of like the journey through everything. There's much more detail in all of that. For sure. But hopefully you've caught up to the craziness that's me. Yeah.
So you're saying that if I'm not familiar or comfortable with research, I can still get involved and do it.
Absolutely. No, the one thing about PAs and nurse practitioners is, nurse practitioners probably more so than PAs, we're just not taught to do research. It's not part of like the intention of your career path.
Right.
It just, we're kind of taught to clinical and to go out and be with patients. But our physician colleagues, that's kind of during med school. They're like, oh, okay, this attending grabs you and says, you're going to do like chart review and, do some retrospective analysis. And they're like, I didn't know, too bad, you're doing it anyways. And so then, they're doing clinical trials. And it just is baked into their pathway.
Fosters that environment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so they think about it a lot, even if accidentally. Yeah. We just don't get a lot of those opportunities because it's not intentional. But boy, there's a huge need. There is a huge need. It's very similar. The analogy is how we interact in the medical space in healthcare. We can team up on the research side as well. I mean, I'm a sub-investigator. I'm a principal investigator in certain trials, but I'm a sub-investigator, which means I really run that role similar to as I would as a PA in medicine. I'm a sub-investigator in a research trial. And so it's very similar in terms of how you think and how you help a clinical trial roll outwards.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, and I agree. There's a huge need for it.
Yeah.
I think there's just the hesitancy from people of, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. How would I even go about doing this to get involved in that kind of thing? And I think similarly for the organizations. And you're heavily involved. We just talked about that, a lot of the organizations. But again, there's a need for it. And I think there's an avenue. Yeah. And how would you suggest? What would you say to people in their field, whether it be physician assistant or nurse practitioner, getting involved in their local organizations?
Well, so this is the important part. I think what you said is, how do you get involved in your local organization? As part of my tenure, I have brought forward a new position in the Utah Academy, which is industry relations chair. And so Sam Shawan is up at Sam. I hopefully didn't butcher your last name, but he's up at the University of Utah, PA in HEMONC, and was just interested, like, hey, I want to do something in the industry space, and so I've been feeding him my contacts for the medical science liaisons, otherwise known as MSLs, and this is the scientific medical side of any pharmaceutical industry. They come and they can teach you about the science, they can teach you about the disease state, what the molecules are, etc. The ones that we generally are like, oh wait, I don't have time to talk to you, is the marketing side. And it's unfortunate because they bring a lot of great information, and we can sometimes shut them out of ignorance. They really have information, but you do have to, figure out that relationship.
Yeah.
But I would say now at the Utah Academy, we're making it intentional. We want industry relations between our organization and industry, but it's a way to pull our PA members, and nurse practitioners can be part of UAPA, to be involved in that.
To that end, is there financial perks to being part of these organizations? What are the types of advantages for someone to think about joining organizations as such?
Yeah. Some of them are tangible, and some of them are a little bit intangible. Probably a lot more intangible than tangible, in the sense of like return on investment. I'm a member, so I get all these things. Yeah,
sure.
You get access to CME, you get access to a network, and emailing other members if you're trying to find someone, and then perhaps a way to access what legislation's going on. Okay, on the intangible side is if you get involved in an organization, I've grown up, I no longer call it a resume, but we do call them resumes. It's a curriculum vitae.
Yeah.
It's your life's work,
Yeah.
right? It's what it's a body of your life, and this is what sets you apart. Is if you're involved in organizations, that's part of ranking in academics. Is they like, what are you doing with your community? Well, I've just been working at this clinic and I just see patients. Okay, but what more? What have you done? Like, what are you doing with your community?
Good perspective.
And so, joining an organization allows you to, and actually perspective is the right word. It broadens your perspective. Then you're not in an echo chamber of a clinic with just the clinicians you work with. You've broadened that. You have conversations on a wider basis. You go, oh, you guys do that? We should do that. And why don't you use that therapy? Oh, okay. So it broadens things, because we work in echo chambers. We really do. It's a really neat thing to then, I call it brackish water, right? Is to kind of touch up against some salty individuals other places when you're like fresh water,
Yeah.
And it really, really opens your mind to like,
Oh, yeah.
okay, practice is different in different areas.
Yeah, even within your own specialty.
Yeah.
I feel like just interacting with other providers doing your same specialty, I think you can broaden your perspective and see what other people are doing in your own space.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's things that are done, in your specialty by other people in different places, and you're like, wow, why do you do that?
Yeah.
And it can be region specific, it can be insurance specific, but they may have some data that you're not aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So for our listeners, let's tap into a week in the life of Viet. I want you just to kind of tell me what a Monday through Friday looks like for you at Current with all your different hats.
Yeah, and how are you balancing that? Because you've got family at home as well.
Yes, and it's different at different points in your life. So let me just start by saying, currently, I'm midway through life. I have 3 children.
Is 29 midway through life?
Yes.
Oh, I love you. I love you. Yeah. No, I have a 23-year-old. And I have a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
And I have a 14-year-old. And so it's a little bit different navigating their life now in terms of activities. Certainly you pull me back 10 years and you're attending cross-country meets, you're going to swim meets, and I coached my youngest daughter in her soccer for a while, and now she's doing competition. But what does it look like in a week of Viet when I'm not traveling?
Yeah.
Because, boy, this has been a heavy travel year to conferences, etc. But from Monday to Friday, typically what happens is probably the most solid parts of my week are clinic. You just can't change that much, right? It's not that flexible. It is what it is. And so I have Monday afternoons and then Tuesday mornings.
And how many patients are you seeing?
Yeah, no, great question. So, and let me be clear, I'm preventive cardiology, which is even a more of a subspecialty than just general cardiology. So I see a lot of referrals from my cardiology colleagues, let alone primary care, etc. So it's not running and gunning. We do tend to fill up with a lot of consults. So I see about 7 to 8 on my follow-up day, which is Monday afternoons. And then on Tuesdays, we usually stack the deck with about 12 patients, but I'm not seeing all those. We have 3 of us, my partners, PA Leslie Iverson, and then Jeff Anderson, Dr. Anderson, and then myself. And then we, it just whoever's up to bat is seeing that consult. So I see about 3 or 4 of the consults, but about 8 follow-ups in my regular afternoon clinic. That Monday morning, I'm a pre-charter. I like to pre-round on my patients, but at the same time, it's flexible moments where often, because I'm involved in over 25 different studies. Enrolling trials right now, I have about 5 clinical trials that are enrolling that I'm involved with. Then I have a bunch of data studies, and then I have a bunch of clinical trials that are in follow-up phase. Wow. Each of those have a principal investigator, and fortunately I'm in a tier where there's my 3 physician partners are generally the PIs, and so we only have those 3 big meetings that have to be at, and then we combine all of their trials in those meetings. In any phase 3, or actually any trial, you need to have regular study meetings, and because you have to, how are we doing on the money? Are we appropriately screening? How are we doing in terms of, adverse events? And are there any issues with the community in terms of, like, have you overstepped? And, they don't want you in their office or anything like that. But we kind of pile that in. And so, like Kirk Knowlton, he'll have like 5 studies that we discuss in his meeting. Jeff will have, 5 to 6 studies in his. Brent will have. And then mine are, even though I'm a PI on a couple of studies, we just pack them into where I'm already a sub-I. We just sneak my studies in there.
Efficient.
So anyways, coming back to that. So you kind of get an idea, like through my week, I have these major study meetings. And then if I have flexibility, if I'm not pre-charting, I'm usually seeing a patient for screening, doing the physical exam. We have study coordinators that are, bringing in the patient, doing the main screening, and then we as PIs typically come in and do the physical exam portion. We're the clinicians, and then if there are any therapies to apply, like injections, then we do those. But not every single study meeting with a patient or study enrollee needs a PI or sub-I there.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So,
but then, So then going throughout the week, I have multiple meetings for the studies, and then my national duties, because I'm on committees for the American College of Cardiology, American Heart Association, American Society of Nuclear Cardiology, American Society of Preventive Cardiology. I'm with the National Lipid Association, UAPA.
Have you calculated how many hours per week that you're spending in your profession?
I worry about doing that because I think it would scare me a little bit. But a lot of it, fortunately, is show up and give perspective.
Right.
And so...
do you feel overburdened, overwhelmed?
No, because it's fun.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're having fun, yes. But if I came into every meeting like, oh my gosh, let's just get through the agenda, then I'd be burnt out. And then it would be like, Viet, you said yes to these things. Yeah. But I say yes to things because I already anticipate I'm going to have fun. And so I go and have fun.
Enjoy it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sometimes really irreverent during meetings, and I'll say things, and you're not too crass, but enough that it gets people like, you hear that. And,
right.
And
but everybody needs one of those.
Yeah,
gotta keep the room light.
You have to. You have to, and you have to have fun while you're doing the work of improving healthcare.
Yeah.
I think if it's too serious, then that's why we talk about burnout all the time. I think people go through and they forget that care should be fun, and there are moments that certainly are tragic, and are serious moments. But even in those moments, I have found time to joke with my patients, And I think they appreciate that because they keep coming back, I think. Yeah, they keep coming back.
That's right.
But I think they recognize I'm real.
Yeah.
I'm the same person no matter where you meet me.
Yeah,
Love
that's
that.
awesome. I think that's great advice, is really trying to connect that way and keep perspective for the patients.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff is already hard enough for these people that have some serious struggles, which is why they're in front of you and I.
Right.
So we
Right.
can give them some sound advice, keep it real, but also try not add to the burden.
And I think that's really the most important thing is if you can keep the patient as a human being, then you'd say to yourself, would I want that overly serious interaction? And in some instances, yes, but in general, I want that relationship to be much more than sterile with my own clinicians as a patient.
And I think the secret there is breaking up the monotony. I think that, we, for instance, have taken half days on Wednesdays where we can focus our attention in other spaces.
Yeah.
And that's provided almost a sense of making sure you don't reach that burnout phase, because if you're just in the clinic seeing patients every single day and trying to be the firefighter putting out the fires every single day, it does weigh on you. So having this chance where you can break up the day and and put your hands in other spaces, it gives you a better perspective, but it also just allows you to take some time to decompress from some of the other things you have to do on a daily basis in the profession. So I think that's an important thing that listeners should definitely adhere to.
I like what you said, though, because it's not fully away from medicine. Because you're doing something fun in a different way with medicine.
Yes.
And I think that's what we need, right? Yep. Is sure, it's one thing to like go off for the weekend to go hiking, but it's also, I think it's better in your workday to find ways to reinvigorate and change how you interact with medicine.
Love that.
You have to find a different way to make it fun, and it has to be medicine. It really does, because it really makes it enjoyable for you.
Yeah. Something to look forward to. I love it. How about in a little bit more specifically towards cardiology?
Yeah.
Who would be the right patients to send to you? Who is it that you interact with, and what does your interaction with patients look like? Because you're a little bit unique. You're specialized even within a specialty.
Yeah. And I just want everyone to recognize that when you say cardiology, we kind of have this sense of like this big block of specialty, and yet there's heart failure. There's electrophysiology, there's structural heart, CT surgery sometimes gets lumped in there, but there's surgery. And then you have vascular medicine. In my area, preventive cardiology. Now we're starting to have cardiometabolic clinics. And so it's wider and broader that and I usually point my fellow advanced practice providers to the fact that our physician organizations have like 7 or 8 different national organizations that represent those subspecialties, but here as APAC, the Academy of PAs, we're like trying to put you all under the same umbrella and tent. So who would I see? I still am a general cardiology PA at heart. I love to see the whole thing and the whole gamut. I still have patients that have heart failure that I manage. I still have ischemic patients, just your bread and butter coronary artery disease. I love to manage hypertension. I still love to manage, especially lipids, but that's kind of where my preventive cardiology chops are, is in the lipid space.
We all love it. I'm glad you love it, Viet.
I'm so glad you love it.
Who doesn't like an LDL?
Man.
So yeah, I mean, if you have a general cardiology patient that you're like, should I call cardiology or not? Yeah, go ahead. Send them to me. I will help make sure that they get to the right specialty as well. Because I work very closely with my subspecialty partners. I send patients off to get ablation or to get pacemakers, but I keep them and manage those patients afterwards.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we team up with another set of PA colleagues who will come in and do device interrogations, and I used to do that, so it's kind of fun to be able to manage those patients in my clinic. But by and large, I'm moving towards kind of a middle ground between cardiometabolic health and preventive cardiology, because in the end, almost all of those diseases roll up to cardiology.
Yeah.
If you have now MASH and MASLD, they have cardiovascular disease before they end up with cirrhosis. Diabetes, they end up with, coronary disease. Folks that have chronic kidney disease, before they go to end-stage renal and dialysis, often they have a cardiovascular event. So if you manage those things up front and you do it sooner upstream, then often, that you can also stop their disease, but reduce their risk of having a cardiovascular event. So those are the patients that I love to see. I've really gotten into the GLP-1s and, of course, SGLT2s. All of these, I tell my patients, I'm like, they're actually cardio, kidney, metabolic, and their side gig, in this gig economy, they do diabetes on the side. That's how they came out initially, but they're really cardiovascular, kidney,
of course,
of course. And they happen to do some diabetes work.
That's awesome. And I feel like probably almost more than any other specialty, one topic I love to ask is what's trendy. Yeah. And I feel like things change in your world all the time. Just this morning, I saw a Medscape article I was browsing through real quick talking about renal denervation for hypertension.
Yes.
I was blown away at that.
Yes.
But you guys in your specialty are making advancements all over the place, and your recommendations seems like are evolving and always fine-tuning constantly. But what would you say, what are the most trendy things right now in your world?
Yeah, I mean, if we just start in my home base of preventive cardiology, probably the most trendy thing is recognizing Lp(a). And if you don't know what that is, it's lipoprotein A. It's a very similar molecule to LDL cholesterol. Very similar. It looks the same, carries the same cholesterol esters. Both of them have a protein. Now it's going back to our lipid lectures. Both of them have a protein called ApoB.
I remember everything you taught me, by the way.
Take me back, Professor. Take me back. Take me back.
So, cholesterol has to be bound by this this protein, apolipoprotein, and it's ApoB100. But Lp(a) is an additional tag underneath, and it makes this much more atherogenic than LDL cholesterol. So it's more likely to build plaque, but it's also thrombogenic. So it's more likely to cause clot. And, the thing is only really 1 in 5 individuals have an elevated Lp(a). So you've heard me say this before. I hate it when people call LDL cholesterol bad cholesterol. It just is a cholesterol. In higher amounts, it can cause atherogenesis. But Lp(a), there's no good reason for it. It is a bad cholesterol. It just doesn't have a good function when LDL cholesterol already delivers correct cholesterol to our cells, etc. It just happens to also cause atherosclerosis. But Lp(a) is a bad cholesterol. So I would say that's trendy. We order more of those. I'm a sub-investigator in 2 phase 3 trials looking at therapies to reduce that. Ordering ApoB. That's that protein. So instead of just trying to get an LDL cholesterol, when you get ApoB, you get all of them that eventually become LDL cholesterol. So ApoB100 is more prognostic, and if you treat it, lower it rather than just LDL cholesterol as a target, then what we see is even better risk reduction. In the AFib space, atrial fibrillation, what's trendy? Ablation as a first line. Often what we said was you had to fail antiarrhythmics and then you could go to ablation. But what we're finding is physiologically you let that arrhythmia go a little too long and it just sets up. It sets up. So the people who are actually the best candidate are kind of your first time AFib that are having these paroxysmal events. It's not just one time because of a disease. Sure. They had a fever or whatever and then had AFib. That's not who you ablate. It's the folks that then show that they're paroxysmal, they're occurring. And so in that first 3 to 6 months or a year, that's the person I would refer for early ablation. Then you're not messing with, potentially lethal antiarrhythmics. You still need to prophylax people with, for stroke. So anticoagulation is still important there. In the coronary space, we don't electively stent everything and anything. It's no longer, full metal jacket down.
You get a stent. You get a stent. You bypass. So really what it is here is this idea and recognition that stent doesn't cure the disease.
Right.
It will open up the area, focal, disease area, but it doesn't actually reduce mortality. What it does is it's like a really invasive anti-anginal is what it is. So what we found is when in multiple trials now, when you match up against medical management, it's equal. You don't lose more lives. And by the way, this is like a positive stress test and angiogram that shows pretty good stenosis, but they're stable otherwise. They have chronic stable angina. You can let them be medically managed and feel comfortable about that. Huh. It's scary, but at the same time, we've done the trials. So that's that space. And then of course, TAVR, MitraClip, all these things. I will tell you, the funniest story was when I first came out into cardiology, me and Dr. Kevin Walsh and I went to an American College of Cardiology conference, and we're watching, they're presenting this aortic valve replacement through transcatheter, and it was in a pig. And we were both like, what? We'll never be able to see that in humans. That was like 2005. Guess what we do on a regular basis?
Right.
TAVR.
Yeah, of course.
And it started out in the severe folks that couldn't tolerate surgery because we'd kill them, to now the moderate, intermediate folks. And now the question is earlier better? Is earlier better to replace these before you have physiologic structural changes?
Yep. That's awesome.
I mean, there's so many cool things.
I know. I figured you'd have a lot. Cardiology seems like that's how they are.
There are a lot. Yeah.
It's so fun.
Well, I think we probably better wrap it up here. This has been a ton of fun. We could go all day, but we better not hold everybody too much longer. What do you think, Tyler? What'd you learn today?
Well, there's a lot to digest there. I'll be honest with you. I think the first takeaway, I loved what you said, jumping in with both feet. I think anyone interested in medicine should jump in with full feet, test the waters. You'll find your space. You found your space. You're holding many different hats. I also like the idea of not being afraid to dabble in a couple of different things, because I think it does help to prevent that burnout. Yeah. And I love what you're doing with research, because I think you're bringing to the forefront of medicine this idea of early intervention. What can we do to prevent? And that's something that we as westernized medicine needs further encouragement of, is the preventative factors of treatment. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Awesome to get to know you. Awesome to hear your story. And I appreciate you coming by today.
Yes. How would people reach out to you if somebody wanted to connect, maybe get to know you, ask some questions? How would they find you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Viet Heart PA. That's the same handle for Twitter. You're welcome to find me on LinkedIn as well. I guess Facebook and Instagram kind of fall together. Yeah. I have dabbled into TikTok, but you won't find a lot of videos there. Mainly it's just to kind of be in that space for my kids.
That's awesome.
But those are the main areas.
That's awesome. Well, encourage people to reach out. Viet is awesome. Super helpful, great resource for anybody. As far as Summit goes, kind of similar outlets, Instagram, Summit Brain, Spine, and Orthopedics. Our YouTube channel is Summit Medical Institute. And my favorite, as always, is come see us in person every Tuesday morning. Our interdisciplinary grounds case discussion at the Mountain Point Hospital in Lehigh, Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m. Special shout out always to our production team. Can't see them, can't hear them, but those are the real heroes. Dallin and Amelia help us out a bunch, put this all together. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay, I love it. Leave a review for us. Let us know what you think. What do you like to hear? What's working well? Who would you want to hear from?
If you want to be a guest, shout out, reach out. We want to have you on the show, so
we'd love to have you.
They're not too mean.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, this has been another episode of the Many Minds podcast, where we are encouraging collaborative community healthcare using many minds for better outcomes. I'm Alex Davis.
I'm Tyler Murray.
Thanks for listening with us. We'll see you next time.
Are you ready?